Is this working? Yes, there we go. Hi folks, and welcome to the Santa Monica Democratic Club. Let's hear it for us. All the wonderful committee, everybody. Congressman has entered the building. He's on his way up, and we'll be having him shortly. Just want to take a couple of minutes to get things begun and started. A special welcome to our city council persons. Gleam Davis, where are you, Gleam? In the back. And Ken Winterard. Where's Ken? And Kevin McCune in the blue shirt in the top. In the back. Welcome. We've got terrific city council members. We're very pleased with that. A couple announcements before we get cooking. First of all is the healthcare movie. That's a top issue, as you well know right now. The healthcare movie is going to be shown at a private home this Saturday night at 7 o'clock up on 9th and Alta Street. And if anyone would like to see this terrific documentary film of really how single payer evolved in Canada and the whole issue, even brought up to date regarding the medical system in the United States, please see Rachel. Where's Rachel on the side here in the black top? Please see her, get the details, Saturday night, 7 o'clock. You really get to find that extremely worthwhile. The other thing you should know about it is many of you are familiar with Robert Reich. Robert Reich was the Secretary of Labor under Jimmy Carter as well as Bill Clinton, and he has come out with a new film, a new documentary film, which is going to be at the Laemmle Theater here in Santa Monica on October 11th, I think, is when it's opening, which is October 11th, Laemmle Fourplex Theater, called Inequality for All. Now, if any of you watched Charlie Rose 2 or 3 nights ago, he interviewed Robert Reich. You know Robert, he's like 4'8" and drives a Mini Cooper. The car matches Robert. And he has come out with this great new documentary film, really about the inequality of income and of what has changed in the United States since really 1970 until now. And this difference between the high income, low income, and how we've been handling that. That's the other big issue, I would argue, that's happening in the country. In the meantime, the Democratic Club is moving forward. We've got some terrific programs lined up. Next month in October, is it November or October? The next meeting. No, our next meeting I think is October 25th off the top of my head. And that is on, the student financing?
It's October 30th.
October 30th, thank you.
It's all about the cost
of student education costs.
And it's not just tuition and housing. It's a lot of other costs included.
Right. It's a whole issue of how expensive it is for a student to get a college education, and that's, of course, a big issue. So with those announcements, and I believe the congressperson should be real close. I would do a dance, really. I would do the dance, but you do not want to see me dance.
I do. Oh, yes, you do. How about some announcements from the audience?
How about some announcements from the audience? Dorothy Wright, yes, ma'am.
Hi. Some of you have the flyer I gave out. We're going to be showing Gasland 2 up in Topanga, the Topanga Community Club. The Topanga Community Club on October 5th. I urge you all to come and see it and to help us discuss where we go from here. We also have a problem with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and if that passes, then it's going to be very hard to outlaw fracking anywhere in the world. So that's coming up also on October 20th. Progressive Democrats of America, who is having a fundraiser. John Nichols is coming, and Bob McChesney. He gave me flyers for that. You have them. And that's a $35 donation. And that's always a very exciting, inspiring time when John Nichols comes. He's a terrific speaker.
And Hera has in the back.
Hi, I'm Hera Beck, member of the Arts Commission. I want to invite everybody on Saturday to Glow. It is a one-night arts installation extravaganza. There's going to be all kinds of interesting displays. It's going up and down the bike path area and through the pier and beyond, starting at Bay Street and going somewhere north of the pier. There's going to be amazing installations, and artists from all over the world are going to be participating. It starts at, I believe, 6 o'clock. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. 7, thank you. Last time it was 6. And it goes until sometime early in the morning, 3 a.m. And And don't bring, find another way other than a car to get there, I kid you not. First time there was 250,000 people, so, but enjoy, it's free. Except for the food.
That's Saturday night, Frank.
Hi, last April, the city council did some great things about the airport. They all expressed the desire to see the airport turn into a park. There are obviously a lot of legal things and between now and then. But there's a movement that's got started to make a kind of political basis for doing that, and we're having a workshop next Thursday night, not a week from tomorrow night, at the Mount Olive Lutheran Church at 14th and Ocean Park to study that, to get ideas about what a park would be like, and talk about what the possibilities are, really to get behind the city council action. So thanks. And there are flyers out there. It's airporttopark.org.
Thank you. Julie?
One last announcement. On October 20th, our council member Kevin McCune is being honored as a Democrat of the Year. There are Democrats of the Year from every assembly district. It's not in Santa Monica, but it's nearby. It's at the Sheraton LAX, 6 to 9. We are almost finished with our reservations. We just have a couple of spots left at our second table. I would love to start a third table, so if you're interested in going, let me know. Here's the flyer and the invitations here on your way out. Thank you.
We have a terrific board of directors for the Democratic Club. We have two co-presidents, Mary Ann Solomon in the back, co-president in the black top. And myself, Jay Johnson, and I, and Mary Ann together try and work things. We are truly fortunate to have one of the most terrific congresspersons in the United States House of Representatives. Not only this year and last year and year before, but it's up to almost 40 years now. Is it 37 years. We have had the pleasure of having Congressperson Henry Waxman represent us. Represent the West Side. And it's more than representation. It's the things he has had accomplished. As you know, remember the smoking investigation? Was that 20 years ago? And government operations 15 years ago, and reforms 10 years ago. And then this phony diet pills, these supplements that they try and foist on, take a vitamin and it's going to cure cancer. That reform on that thing. And 5 years ago, Henry has been at the forefront on reform movements in this country that's impacted millions of people's lives, not just in our district, not in our state, but in the United States, the entire country. Please welcome Henry Waxman.
Thank you very much for that nice introduction, and I'm delighted to be with all of you. You might ask me what I was just asked by a young man who said, "You're Henry Waxman, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "What are you doing here? You're about to close the government down. Why aren't you in Washington?" Well, I am going back to Washington. Looked like I might have to fly the red eye tonight, but luckily I won't. The reason I was going to do that is there is a bill that we worked out on a bipartisan basis. I'm happy to tell you there are some. And I wanted to be there to present the bill with the Republicans on our committee to have it approved. But my staff called and said that the agreement fell apart. Then they called and said, "Oh, it's back together, but we're not going to bring up the bill on Thursday. So I'm going to fly tomorrow morning rather than all night tonight." We're back in session starting tonight. This week was scheduled as a district work period. And of course, I scheduled myself a lot of meetings, including this evening's report to the Santa Monica Democratic Club. But I am going to go back. The latest information about this back and forth is that the House passed a bill. Now, the House is dominated by the Republicans. They did it with only their votes. They didn't get a single Democratic vote.
What was it, 217 to 210?
They maybe picked up a couple scared Democrats in Republican areas, but they they funded the government until December, because we need to pass something to continue the funding of the government after September 30th, which is a few days away. But they added to that bill, the funding bill, a defunding of Obamacare. And they made the argument that they just want to defund it, and they just want to put it off for a year and make it better. Well, this has not been the way they've conducted themselves when it's come to the legislation to give people health care coverage. And why should we put off a year for people who are waiting desperately for health insurance? People whose child may have a medical condition and the family can't get health insurance, or people who are looking forward to finally getting health insurance. It wasn't available because they couldn't afford it. Now they'll get some tax breaks to help pay for it. And people who are looking to the opportunity, starting also in a couple of days on October 1, to see the marketplaces where if they're going to purchase individual insurance, they'll have choices and see what those choices are. The policy won't take effect until January 1, but people will start looking at the options. Most people are not going to go to this exchange or marketplace to buy their insurance, because most people have their insurance through their jobs, and they'll stay with that. Or if people are on Medicare, they'll stay on Medicare. But for people who have no insurance, they'll be able to go to this marketplace, and rather than, well, it's like being in a union. If you go to your employer as an employee and say, I want to work out a deal with you, I want you to pay me a certain amount of money and provide certain benefits and things like that, your employer would say, no. But if you have a union collective group to go there and negotiate, there's a better chance they're going to work out an agreement. And that's why unions are so important. But for an individual to go and buy an insurance policy on his or her own, they don't get the deal that they would get if they're with a larger group. That's why big employers can get a better deal, because they're buying for a larger group. So this will pool together people to be able to buy insurance and have choices in health insurance. The Republicans voted against this bill. We have voted 40 times on the House floor to repeal it. They've always said they want to repeal it and replace it. We've never heard what their replacement is, how they're going to take care of covering people with pre-existing conditions, for example, which is at the heart of the legislation. So we don't see any approach to that. And they hope that the Supreme Court would have thrown it out. The court didn't. They hoped that Romney would have been elected president and repealed it, and he wasn't elected, and Obama's still president. But they have made it an obsession to try to stop Obamacare. And they have gone to great lengths. There are even going to be advertisements urging people not to buy health insurance. Can you imagine? Urging people not to buy health insurance. Don't participate. They've told governors in states where they're Republican control not to accept 100% federal dollars for the expanding the Medicaid, or we call it Medi-Cal program, which won't cost the states anything. And it'll help pay for doctor's bills, and they'll help pay for hospital bills for a lot of people who are low income. They're not below the poverty line, so they're not eligible for Medi-Cal or Medicaid, but they are going to be eligible for the Medicaid program if the state accepts it. And a lot of states won't accept it. They're just going to leave those people uninsured. And we even had a bill on the House floor where they said they wanted to say that nobody should get any tax subsidies to help them buy their insurance unless the Inspector General of HHS certified they were eligible. Well, the Inspector General contacted us and said, we don't do that. We have no idea how to do such a thing. The Department of Health and Human Services is going to do that. They're going to check in with the IRS just to see what your income was. But that's it. IRS plays no other role than to certify whether you're eligible for the tax breaks. So the Obamacare is at the center of what they're trying to achieve because they don't want it to go into effect. I think once it goes into effect, they'll realize a lot of people are going to be very happy. Now, this is a major change, so it's not going to happen without some glitches. And you can be sure any glitch is going to be built up into a train wreck and all of those kinds of things. We've had 3 years since the law was passed. There were things we could anticipate, and we would like to have corrected them. We can't even get the House Republicans to consider it because the only thing they have wanted to consider is actually a repeal of the law. But the Senate is going to pass the bill, the House passed the bill, funding for 3 months, repeal Obamacare, defund Obamacare. The Senate is going to take it up, and they're going to strip out the Obamacare part of it and send the funding resolution with the same numbers, but making it for 2 months. And the reason Senator Reid wants to do that is because in 2 months, he wants to mount a campaign that we should not let the sequestration that's already in effect stay in effect. The sequestration is so absurd. It was something that both sides agreed upon that would be so awful that nobody would want to let it happen. And that would push everybody to a bipartisan agreement. But it didn't. It didn't push for a bipartisan agreement, and it went into effect. The Republicans said, let it go into effect. But they don't much like it either because it cuts defense as well as domestic spending. What they would like to do is put defense back up and put domestic spending further down. But realize that some of the spending is so arbitrary and so harsh that the National Institutes of Health, they're laying people off. They can't fund ongoing projects for research. And a lot of domestic programs are being hurt badly. There has to be some, if you have a certain number you have to achieve, and you're going to make cuts, you have to figure out what you can afford and what you can't. That's called leadership. That's called making decisions. But instead, what they want to do is just have this arbitrary cut. So Senator Reid is going to try to fund it for fewer months and then make a fight to make up for the sequestration. And of course, the best way to do that is to do it in a balanced way. Figure out what we can afford. And they say the Republicans say they only want to make cuts in spending. But some of these taxes are same things as spending, except they do it through the tax code. So if somebody gets a tax break for their business, the oil companies get a tax break for oil exploration, which of course is why. If they were getting funding for it, we'd say, let's cut those funds. They are getting funding for it, but they're getting funding for it through the tax code. And there are a lot of big tax loopholes that ought to be plugged in. But I don't think the House Republicans have any idea what they will do when this bill comes back in the Senate. They have no game plan. Because what has happened is that the responsible Republican Party, which has been a worthy adversary of the two-party system, has been taken over right now, anyway, by a lot of very extreme Tea Party people. And Senator McCain is shaking his head. Senator, and then I was trying to think of from Utah, Senator Hatch. And these are not liberals, but they're saying this is crazy. You can't repeal Obamacare. You're not going to get a repeal of Obamacare. You can't close down the government. It's irresponsible. They know it's going to hurt the Republican Party. Republican senators don't want the party labeled destroyed by having them close down the government. But in the House, they represent districts. We all represent districts. And they have districts that they've achieved through gerrymandering, that are so safe Republican that their only concern is to make sure they can win the Republican nomination. They don't care about Democrats. In the November election, they just want to win their primary. And it's the result of that is that they don't care what happens to their party. They only care about themselves. And they think that they'll have a majority if they all can get reelected. Now, the gerrymandering that took place in these states was pretty outrageous. It was a partisan gerrymandering. In California, we did something different. And I wished we had this requirement in every state. A redistricting by a commission that didn't look at parties, didn't look at incumbents. They looked at some community of interest and they drew district lines. The problem I saw was that our state did it and other states didn't. So we lost some members that people would have wanted to protect. Senior members on the Republican side of the aisle, like David Dreyer, he's a Republican, he's conservative, he's chairman of the Rules Committee. He had more clout, along with Jerry Lewis, a Republican on the Appropriations Committee, to help our state. And we lost Howard Berman, a senior Democrat. But that's what happened when you have a commission that cares not about incumbency, which is okay. You roll the dice, you have a fair redistricting, you make the best of it. But it hurt our state, and that's why we got to push for other states to follow the reform that we have in California. And we won more votes for the Democrats in the House in the last election, but they ended up with the majority in the House of Representatives because of the redistricting. Second thing I want to touch on, we'll see what happens, how this plays out in the next couple of days. I have to say, my best judgment is I don't see a basis for compromise, because unless Speaker Boehner says to his Republican troops, I'm going to put this on the floor and let everybody vote on it, which of course would mean it would pass, he will face a rebellion in the Republican ranks, because a majority of the Republicans in the House will not want him to do that. And they'll say, no, you can't do something where a majority of the Republicans are not for it. And that just puts us in a stalemate. So he'll either have to take the chance and get them to agree to vote on it, or the government will be closed, and after some period of time, hope that his troops will realize they're getting a black eye and they're hurting the country. And of course, this is going to be followed by the debt ceiling, which must be raised. Not funding the government is just plain stupid. It costs a lot of money. It costs a lot of money because we close things and we have to reopen them, and there's some things you still pay for. It doesn't lower the deficit, it just messes everything up. But not raising the debt ceiling jeopardizes the full faith and credit of the United States. And we have everybody around the world who look to us as a solid investment. They can always trust the finances of the U.S. government. But the consequences are that if we default because we don't raise that debt ceiling to keep the payments to our creditors, they will insist that any money we borrow in the future has to have a risk premium. And we'll have to pay more because we will not be as creditworthy as we've been in the past. And then we'll really be increasing the deficit because we'll have to pay more to borrow money and do what we need to do. It's not going to solve the deficit because we still have to continue paying our bills. In fact, the deficit has come down dramatically because of the cuts we've already made and the economy doing better. What we need is a policy to deal with the long-term deficit, but in the short term, we've got to get people working. And that may upset the deficit projection, but once people are working and the economy is doing better, people working is the most important thing, because the deficits will continue on if people aren't working, because they're not paying taxes if they're not working, they're getting benefits that are available to them, unemployment insurance, and by the way, food stamps. And so the Republicans now want to cut the food stamps by $40 billion over 10 years. How do you cut food stamps? To be eligible for food stamps, the most of the beneficiaries for food stamps are women and children. So literally taking the food out of their mouths, but they want to cut the food stamp program, and that's led to a lot of problems. I'm going to wait for questions till I finish. I'm going to try to be as brief as possible. I just want to touch on a couple issues, and then we'll open it to questions on anything we're going to talk about. Second thing I want to mention is how we're having a difficulty in the Congress getting anything done. This is the worst do-nothing Congress we've ever had. We've passed almost nothing but some post office things, literally. So on the climate change issue, I've been instrumental in forming a bicameral task force on climate. And Senator Whitehouse from Rhode Island and I are chairing it. And we wrote to the president and said to him, there are things you can do on your own. You don't need Congress to approve it under existing law. And we urged them to take actions. And they're starting to take action by putting in regulations that they're proposing for new power plants to emit less of these carbon fuels. They have to go back, I believe, and pass regulations on existing power plants to get them to reduce the emissions of greenhouse gases from those power plants. The Department of Energy is working on regulations to make us more efficient in the use of energy, so that we could avoid having to build power plants for energy that we don't use. We need more. We've accomplished a lot, but we need more in the area of transportation, where we can reduce the emissions from burning gasoline, oil, and that can be done through hybrids and electric cars, natural gas, all sorts of things that will reduce the contribution to the greenhouse gases. One thing that's still outstanding is the Canadian pipeline, the tar sands pipeline, the Keystone pipeline, and the president still is trying to make up his mind. He has said that he would not agree to it if it adds to the greater emissions on climate change. Well, that sounds really encouraging. But in Canada, they're saying, oh, we can figure some offsets. We'll reduce the greenhouse gas emissions from other sources, so this will not be as bad as the tar sands oil. It's not oil per se. We need to use less of it. We still need to use oil in this country. But it's the tar sands. It's the dirtiest possible oil, and the amount of energy they have to use to get it even to flow through a pipeline adds to greenhouse gases. So we'll see what the president does, but we have pressed him over and over and over again not to agree to the Keystone pipeline. Third issue I want to talk about. First issue on the budget, second issue on climate change. We're working a lot on climate change, working to beat back, to push back on the Republicans screaming and yelling. It's a war on coal, and on and on and on they go. But they pass anti-environmental laws trying to stop EPA from acting and so on and so forth. Those laws are really awful. Those proposals are really awful. The thing is that they'll never become law under the present circumstances. So I spend my days fighting them in committee, fighting them on the floor, and then realizing that it's just not going to happen. But we've got to wage the effort. The next thing I want to talk about is foreign policy, because the president really shocked everybody with this proposal to unleash an attack on Syria. Syria has used chemical weapons. These are weapons of mass destruction. It's in violation of all the rules internationally that this is a weapon that's so awful it would not be used. That goes back to World War I, where it was used routinely in Europe as a cripple that maimed so many people. But the president said, and I don't know the full story of why he said it, this would be a red line for him. Now in Syria, they're having a civil war. They're fighting against Assad. Assad is really a bad guy. He's used weapons that he has at his disposal to kill his own people. And he's just killed them with conventional weapons, and now with these chemical weapons, I think he's killed 1,400 people in a recent attack that drove the president to say we had to do something about it. Well, the president said we're going to do something about it, and then he turned it over to Congress. Congress is not going to approve it because the country is so weary of war. If he wanted to be involved in Syria, he could have been involved in helping the rebels. And a lot of people feel strongly he should have done that. I think his view of it was, while there are some rebel groups that you'd like to see prevail, the Al-Qaeda and the Muslim extremists, the Sunni Muslim extremists that don't want Assad because he's from an Alawite and it's a Shia offshoot, they would like to win and take power in Syria. And so the fear was always, if we start arming one group of rebels, will our arms get in the hands of other rebels? And in fact, the rebels are fighting each other militarily in Syria. So it is a mess. And the real question is, how far do you go? How far does the United States go? Because if you start using any kind of military, what do you accomplish? Do you topple Assad? Well, that wasn't what the president said we were going to do. We were going to send him a message. Well, he sent him a message by sending some rockets into Syria. Will that stop him from using chemical weapons? The argument was we were going to degrade his stock. Well, maybe, but no one could show the military example of why that would stop him from using it unless it's not just sending a message, it's a more serious attack. And so there's been enormous opposition to what the president wanted to do. And I must tell you, I was absolutely torn by the whole thing. Because if the Congress rejected it, what message does that send to Iran that's developing a nuclear weapon of mass destruction when we say we won't allow that to happen? On the other hand, you take a step, you've got to figure out where you're going with that step. And I finally took the position, when I was called to the White House, of saying to them, look, you don't use military force unless you've exhausted all other avenues. And there are a number of things you could still do. You could go to the Security Council and force Russia to vote on banning chemical weapons and acting on its chemical weapon treaty. You could, and I had a whole bunch of things and I went through it with them. But at the time we were talking, the President's Chief of Staff is the one talking to, it was a small group. The Russian overture was being announced and he wasn't even aware of it. He'd heard it, but he didn't take it seriously. And the Russian overture was to work to have a diplomatic way to reduce the stockpile, eliminate the stockpile. Syria would cooperate and so on and so forth. Okay, at least you're trying to do something on a diplomatic front. I have no confidence that's going to be successful. I don't trust Putin for a minute. I certainly don't trust the Syrians. The Syrians said they didn't even have these weapons. And then they said, oh yeah, well, we'll get rid of them. So I certainly don't trust them. But try everything before you ever use military. That's the feeling that I have. Especially I'll get involved, which could really get us very much more deeply involved. The president now has a new overture from Iran. And the new president in Iran has sent big signals that he wants to be more cooperative with the United States. I'm skeptical about that, but you look at these, you test them. You see how far they're willing to go. The whole strategy on Iran was to impose sanctions that would be so punishing that they would change their minds about developing a nuclear weapon. Well, the new president said, first of all, he wished all Jews happy New Year, which was very nice. They hadn't been so friendly to Jews before. After all, his predecessor denied the Holocaust. His predecessor and the grand leader said that they think that Israel ought to be wiped off the face of the earth because it's a malignancy. And now he wished us all happy New Year. But he said they want to negotiate with us. Well, that's been our strategy. Get them to negotiate with us to give up their nuclear weapons. But you got to be pretty hard-nosed about this because they would love to take us down the primrose path while they continue to build their nuclear weapons. They've done that, obviously, in the past. And of course, he said they never intended nuclear weapons. Well, that's just a lie. They have been working on developing nuclear weapons. And we've got to get them to stop that. If we can reach a diplomatic solution, that would be great. If we can get Iran to change and open up to the West and to the United States, that would be fantastic. But don't take it on their word. It's got to be tested. Those are the issues I wanted to raise with you. There are a lot of other things that I know people want to talk about in addition to those. And so I'm just going to open it up to questions. I'm sorry I talked longer.
Pass around the remote mic. This lady right here. What's your name? What's your name?
Laura.
This is Laura.
Hi, I'm Laura Salaji. We've met before. I wanted to kind of say that I really appreciate your focus on global climate change. I think that's an extremely important issue that we really, really must pursue. And in light of that, although this may sound trivial, I want to point out that the Santa Monica Airport is a contributor to carbon emissions. For example, one cross-country flight by a jet, a small jet, is equal to a four-person household with 2 cars using their cars for a year. And
Let me ask you to get to the question.
oh yeah. Well, anyhow, oh, good point, because I could go on. Thank you.
Yeah, I know like this airport issue.
I know. So anyhow, you did say that you would consider helping close the airport if there were popular demand for that. I happen to live in Venice, which we do want the airport closed. So I know you're meeting with the FAA, so what do you think you can do to help us, and will citizens who are concerned be party to that meeting?
Well, let me tell you about my views on the airport. There are things we've asked the FAA to do in terms of safety, reducing the emissions, and some other actions that involve the present operation of the airport. But the lease is coming up, and I want my constituents to be involved in the process of what's going to be there after that lease is up, whether there's going to even be an airport. And it was interesting, I went to a meeting in Venice, and they were saying they're so angry about this airport that's been imposed upon them by Santa Monica. And I told them, wait a second, I've been representing Santa Monica for a long time. Venice is new to me. But a lot of people in Santa Monica are just as disturbed at the airport as they are. I asked the FAA to come here for a community meeting and hear what the community has to say. And they wrote back to me that they would not do that because there could be lawsuits. And they may have to be involved in lawsuits by interested parties. I've written back to them and said that's not an acceptable answer. They don't have to protect themselves from lawsuits. They have to hear what the community has to say. So I'm going to make sure that they're here, that they understand from the community in Santa Monica and in LA the impact of airport, and to talk through with all of us, not what they want to do, but what we need to do together. But it's going to be, I think, a decision that the local government is going to have to very, very much involved.
Fast track and the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and I want to be sure that you will not vote for fast track authority for that pact, whatever it is.
What are you talking about, the Trans-Pacific Partnership?
Trans-Pacific Partnership.
There are a number of trade agreements that are being negotiated, and the way that trade has always been handled in the past is that the president will present whatever he agrees on to the Congress to vote up or down. And therefore, the Congress won't be able to pick and choose issues in the trade agreement. The problem with that idea is that there are a lot of things on the table. When they talk about trade and this TPP, this Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, they have issues that I think are really outrageous. And people say, oh, trade, we all want trade, it's good to have trade. But they want to protect the pharmaceutical companies. And so they want the brand name companies to be able to sell their drugs, even in developing countries where they can't even afford it, and keep them from getting a generic longer period of time than we will take in the United States to get a generic drug. They've even gone so far, our people, President Obama's people, to talk about putting on the table the ability of the tobacco companies, that of course operate internationally, to come back and challenge the American tobacco laws. And I talked to the trade representatives, this is crazy. This was an accomplishment of the man who appointed you. And he said, I know, but I'm worried about the agricultural interest, because they say if you make an exception for tobacco, they're worried that other products will be attacked. So I said, this is different. There's no other product like tobacco. It's the only product, when used as intended, kills people. And there should be no effort by the United States to protect the tobacco industry. And there are other trade agreements that are being discussed with Europe. So I want us to be sure to look very carefully at those trade agreements and be able to vote on it and not just have an up or down vote. So I'm going to be very active in that.
You're opposing fast track.
I will not vote for Chester.
Yes, my name is Ola. I have relatives in Chicago, and some are very afraid of what's happening in Chicago right now. What are Congress or our representatives doing that you know of, trying to eliminate the assault weapons and the murders in Chicago?
Well, I appreciate that question. I support a ban on assault weapons. I don't see any reason why anybody needs assault weapons. And California has a ban on assault weapons. But we had a shooting right here in Santa Monica. And the fellow that went and shot a bunch of people developed his own assault weapon. So he was able to buy parts off the internet and put together the assault weapon. We had a hearing in Santa Monica about it, so that you might have been there or read about it. And it led to legislation that I've introduced. One, to stop the ability to sell parts for assault weapons, but also to make sure that people can get mental health services and more research on why people use guns for violence, especially for these mass killings. There was a prohibition in the law that wouldn't let the Centers for Disease Control or the National Institutes of Health even research that issue, because they wanted to protect the gun. And President Obama said no, he's not going to abide by that. They're doing more research. We need more research in this area. We need more services for mental health. We need a ban on assault weapons, and we need background checks. The overwhelming majority of Americans support background checks before anybody's able to buy any kind of gun. And there's no reason not to do it. I thought the Senate would do it. I don't know how many murders have to take place before they'll finally get around to doing it. The climate does not look good in the Congress right now, from Republicans and Democrats. And we've got to keep the pressure on to get people to change.
Second question, I'm sorry. Are the guns made in America?
Hello, Congressman. Thank you for coming. My name is Alan Toy. I'm the director of the West Side Center for Independent Living, which has been around as long as you've been in office, and we're happy we're both lasting so long, you and the center. Next April, almost 500,000 frail and elderly and disabled Californians will be moved into what is called the Duals Demonstration Project. They're Medi-Cal, Medicare eligible, so that's why the duals. How can your office work with agencies like mine to ensure that these people who are pretty disenfranchised and whose medical care costs are very high can have an adequate voice in selecting the healthcare options that best meet their needs and keep them stable and safe in community-based settings?
Great question. Well, we've been working with your organization and other organizations as well on this issue. Duals means that people are eligible for Medicare, which usually means they're elderly, but it also could mean they're disabled. And they're also eligible for Medi-Cal, which means they're poor. And what Governor Brown has wanted to do was to say that those people that are dual eligibles should be put into a insurance program, a managed care program that would handle their needs. Now, in theory, it sounds great, but we're talking about people who are very frail, often suffering from dementia, many of whom don't speak English, people who are very vulnerable, and if they have people that they're seeing now, in the center, other providers that are helping them, to take them away and put them in a plan that may not even be functioning well for their needs yet. Maybe someday they will, but they're not ready yet, is a very scary proposition. And so I urge the administration in Washington not to give California the waiver that they wanted to do this. I said, we provided in the Affordable Care Act the ability to have demonstration projects. And in some parts of California, they're ready to do it on a bigger scale, but we're not ready in LA. And the administration went ahead. I'm critical of the Brown administration for wanting to do this, and the Obama administration for giving them a green light. But they want to go ahead and put people in these plans. But they run into a lot of problems because the plans are not ready for them. So they've granted the waiver, but they're holding back and they've postponed it. And we've got to monitor it very carefully and see if we can push it back. Imagine if you're one of those people who are dual eligible and unsophisticated, not speaking English, maybe not being mentally capacitated to understand it. They wanted to automatically put them in a plan. They'd have to say no, otherwise they're in it. And then once they're in the plan, they could never leave. They'd have to be locked in there. That was the proposal that was put forward, and that's a terrible proposal. Yes, next question.
Yes, hello. I'm Paula Fern, and I actually have met you through Cafe York. Yeah. I'd like to know about the Older Americans Act and what's happening with it, and also the chained cost of living and Social Security.
The Older Americans Act has been on the books for many, many decades. It funds a lot of programs for seniors. It's up for reauthorization. Periodically, the bills have to be reauthorized. And I don't think there's been any action on it, and it's a shame because it's very much needed. People rely on Social Security. They rely on Social Security for many as their only source of income. It's not a generous source of income for people to live on. It's supposed to be part of your retirement, but it's an important part of people's retirement. And Social Security has been on a keep pace with inflation process where there's an automatic cost of living allowance, an increase based on the inflation. There is an effort to change the inflation index, and that inflationary index is one that will be a lower increase than what people would otherwise have. I think there's a failure to recognize that the costs of living for seniors is different than the rest of the population. There's a lot more costs that have to be borne by people for their drugs and for their health care and for their needs that are not picked up by any government plan. And people need, especially in Social Security, the full cost of living increase. The President has put on the agenda to go to there's a lower cost of living. So I'm willing to do it if this will help break through the negotiation stalemate with the Republicans on the deficit. I think it was a mistake for him to put that out there, because that shouldn't be part of the discussions on the debt. It should be part of a discussion on how you're going to change Social Security, make Social Security viable. It's been viable for quite a long period of time, but make changes in Social Security. I would rather see the lift the cap on the amount of money that people pay their Social Security taxes than say that people who are on it, you're not going to get your increases that you're entitled to. So I am very much against the President's proposal.
Chris Wall.
Hey, Christopher Walton here. Citizens United, there's no momentum for a constitutional amendment. What can we do?
The Citizens United was a case before the U.S. Supreme Court that surprised everybody. Remember, we were told that they didn't want to have an activist court. They would do the job of dealing with the issues before them and be somewhat modest as to the role of the judiciary, not to take the place of the legislative or the executive branch. Well, there was a case that didn't have to be decided on this issue, but the judges seized it to rule on a 5-4 basis that corporations and unlimited amounts of money can go to these non-profit organizations that could then spend money. They can't say they're for a candidate or against a candidate, but in effect they could talk about who they're for based on some issues. And it's not even the issues that they're organized around. So it is a huge loophole. We have an incredible problem in our democracy with money so rampant in this whole system. At the minimum, we've been trying to get a disclosure of the money. If they're going to be unlimited dollars from corporations who are now to be considered the same as individuals, or unlimited amount of money by individuals, like the Koch brothers, reporting tons of money to try to determine the outcome of campaigns, we ought to at least have the disclosure of who's putting in the money. And that is an ongoing fight. There are some efforts to use the IRS to force corporations to disclose this through the requirements of corporations through the tax code. One of the issues you've heard about is Republicans claim that the conservative nonprofits have been discriminated against. Well, the IRS was looking to see whether a nonprofit was really a nonprofit. And they were looking with greater care at some of these groups that call themselves Tea Party or whatever something name. They would look at it as something that was not really a nonprofit, but they wanted to investigate it more carefully. And they did it on both sides of the aisle, the Democrats and Republicans. Well, the Republicans seized on it when they heard about the Tea Parties being singled out, and even though they've done an investigation where all the facts show that there was no partisan intent, the IRS is being beat up regularly by Darrell Issa, a fellow Californian, who's the chairman of the committee that I once chaired, the Oversight Government Reform Committee. And that's all over the question of checking out these so-called nonprofits. We need disclosure. I would like to see Citizens United overturned. Constitutional amendment is tough. 2/3 vote of the Congress to get it to the states to consider. That's just so hard to do. Maybe we'll get a break some point in the Supreme Court. Maybe somebody will change his or her mind, or maybe President Obama will be able to fill a vacancy that might make a difference on the 5-4 decisions.
Next question.
Beautify the campus. And I don't know if the decree would affect them, but unless you have other information, I've looked at that as a pretty good group. I think it adds to the quality of the VA campus. But I did support the decision by the judge in the ACLU lawsuit. I have always felt that land is only for veterans, and this has been an ongoing fight for a very long period of time. Secretary Nicholson, who was the Secretary of the VA, told me that he had been a real estate developer, and this land could bring in a lot of big money if it was sold off. And he's right, it's prime real estate. The problem is that, one, the land was supposed to be only for veterans. Secondly, LA can't sustain more traffic with high-rise buildings and commercialization. If we had an emergency, the people couldn't even get from UCLA out to the freeway if they had more traffic than they already have surrounding the VA. So I never thought that the property ought to be used for anything but veterans, and Feinstein and I put through legislation to protect that property. The leases that were on there, which was the subject of the court decision, was that they didn't want these leases, and we were trying to get rid of those leases as well. Why should the property be used for filming for one of the studios, or car rental, which is what they were doing on the property, or what were some of the other things? Well, I was thinking more of the profit-making things, because the argument was, oh, this is money that's going to go to veterans. Well, we can never get an accounting of the money. It shouldn't be used for anything else but for the veterans itself. So we have fought to preserve that campus for veterans' use. And we've recently had a great deal of success in pressing Secretary Shinseki to agree to a lot of policies that are going to help us deal with the homeless problems. We have a shocking homeless problem for veterans, people who put their lives on the line, and then come back with all sorts of medical problems, mental health problems and others, and they're homeless. So we have an agreement to build 2 other buildings and get the funding for those 2 other buildings, to have a one-stop center for homeless people on the campus, to take the HUD-VASH vouchers, which allow people to get apartments and have the therapeutic services that surround it, to increase the number of people that go out into the streets to find the homeless veterans and to bring them to services of one sort or another, dramatically increasing this. And I think this is an important step forward. I do want to comment about you, Bob, because you have been a real conscience trying to press for the veterans. We haven't always agreed, but I admire the fact that you care about this, a lot of passion about it, and I too think we have a real strong obligation to our veterans to make sure that land's there for them, they get what they're due, all the services, and help them get rehabilitated and back into the community and get jobs. These are clear obligations. How we do it sometimes becomes an area of dispute. Whether we get the funding for it is often a dispute. Before we want to, I don't know how much more time you want me to do.
1, 2, 4, we have roughly at least 4. Depends on your stamina.
Your stamina. Let me just say something before we get to the rest of the questions. I'm honored that you're all here, and I appreciate your attentiveness to what I have to say. And I think the questions have been really good, solid questions. And whether you agree with me or not, it's an opportunity to have an exchange. But I have learned some things, even though I've been in Congress for a very long time. And one of the things I've learned is that that commission that we have for redistricting really was a very good idea. And the second thing that I'm impressed by is that I've always believed, need to work on a bipartisan basis to get things done. We don't always agree across party lines, but I never thought compromise was a dirty word. I've always worked to reach compromises with Republicans, and I have friends on the committee that are good Republicans. We used to be able to work together. And I think as a result of the redistricting, it's given me 45% area that's new. I've always had Santa Monica, I've had it for a long time. But I now go into the South Bay. Because of that and the energetic campaign that I had in this last election, I've been a much better congressman because I'm very much more involved in not just the national, international issues, but in a lot of the district issues, whether it's the VA, or the Santa Monica Airport, been involved in those before, but now in the South Bay, the dredging of the marina, which is very important for our commerce, the area of the aerospace industry and how they need to have the LA Air Force Base stay in operation because it brings together what we all ought to feel a great deal of pride, and that's the aerospace industry that adds so much to our economy. And I'm now working with people in that area and learning a lot about it. And I've been in all of the surrounding areas in the district, which includes Manhattan Beach, Redondo Beach, and Hermosa Beach. And one person deserves some credit if I'm a better congressman, and I want to introduce him because I'm very honored that he'd come here today. And that's Bill Bloomfield, who was my opponent the last time around. Okay, let's go into the questions.
Hi, Congressman Danita Huerta. I just wanted to say thank you for all your work you're doing there. It must really be a challenge. I don't know how you keep your composure as well as you do. With respect to all the issues that you've mentioned, I know you're fighting really hard for us, and I thank you. But there's one issue that has not been mentioned, and that issue is middle class. What about us? What's going to happen to us on the sequester? What's going to happen to us about housing? What's going to happen to us? What do we do to help you, stand next to you, or somehow make everyone get along? Because regardless of what goes down there, who doesn't get along, what about us? How do we function?
Well, you are hitting the nail on the head. This country has prospered and has been a leader for the rest of the world as an example because we have a middle class, an opportunity for people to rise economically. And I know it from my own family background. I was the first one to be able to get a college education in my family. My father worked in a grocery store. And I know how people have been able, based on their abilities and the opportunities we give them, and they can take advantage of, people have been able to be in the middle class, support their family with a lifestyle that is what we call American. So, and I very much worry, and we don't hear enough about, the growing gap between the people on the top and the people on the bottom, because the people in the middle class are being pushed one way or the other, mainly down. And that's wrong. That's wrong. We don't want a stratified society. We can look around the world at all these stratified societies. You can never have a peaceful, functioning society. I say this as a generalization. Maybe somebody will come up with an example in history. But when the elite are powerful and protect only themselves and forget about everybody else, they do an enormous amount of damage to themselves. Our economy prospers when others prosper as well. And you can never be safe enough if you're just going to build walls around you and hope that you can go into your secure residence and you can have bodyguards, you can have your own private police, which we do have, or private judges, which we do have, not public, the public commons that's important for the whole society. You can never have an environment that's healthy for everybody if you're well off and we don't protect the environment, and people don't have jobs and can recognize that we all have an interest together in making this a better place. So I feel very strongly we need to talk more and more about those economic issues that divide us. So I believe opportunities for everybody, particularly children, healthcare, education. Education, education, education is the key for advancement. And I believe not only do we make sure that people have opportunities, but in a society where not everybody's going to succeed, we have a safety net. So we protect people and the very dignity of their existence is recognized, so that we don't let some people who just can't make it have to live in the streets and make do in any way they possibly can.
Janice is next, and then we'll come over there. Yeah.
Hi, thank you for coming and speaking with us, Congressman. I think that the election that just happened, the primary in New York, is a return to that feeling that New York had become really two societies, and people seem to be ready to make it one where all of us together, and I'm really hopeful there. When you were talking about the loss of our commons and our public institutions that were sort of universal and served all of us, what could be more productive and constructive than thinking about the idea of returning to, as our postal service is one of those institutions that's under attack and being unwound right from under our feet. What could be more constructive than going back to the idea that we did have in this country, I think up until 1967, and you still see around the world, which is to have postal banks. There are many Americans who are underbanked or unbanked and are at the mercy of predatory payday lenders who could certainly use a place to safely park their money in, and the infrastructure is there. We just lost our Santa Monica WPA era post office. Everything we should have been doing after 2008 would have been to build more things like that, not watch them be unwound. So have you been presented the proposals to return to postal banks? And it's a way to keep the banks going and provide the service.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the concept of postal banks. People used to get the Social Security checks in the mail, now it's direct deposit.
No, the bank, you can actually bank. There were actually banking services.
No, we can't hear you. Denise, use the mic.
Yeah, a question of using the post office for banking services. I'll have to look into that a little bit more and understand it. The Postal Service is written in the Constitution of the United States, and the Postal Service is suffering because we have new technology. People are not sending letters, they're sending emails. And they also have public employees at the Postal Service who have fought hard for collective bargaining, and